That is one. That's basically, that's the serpent.
What's him?
That's a big, deadly, venomous coppermouth. Is that there? Coppermouth?
Cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth.
So he's sitting right here waiting for the little bait fish to come through, and he'll just wipe them out. Or if somebody walks by, he'll hit you too.
That's nice.
How's this for a buggy? So what, they got some fun toys in the south, stuff that, well, it'd be useless to us in the north, that's for sure, in the mountains. My eyes, I got flooded with people offering help for my eyes, and I appreciate it so much. And just so everybody knows, I got a direct link to a doctor here through my friend. And we got some prescription eye drops yesterday. See what comes. We think maybe I got something. So we were on top of this huge buggy thing they got, ripping around the woods at nighttime looking for hogs. It might have got something in there. So, we'll see. Apparently a few days to clear it up. We'll see what happens. So, those guys are hunting right now and I passed. So I better sleep in and give my eyes a break. But I can still do this. So, listen to this. Who do we got? What do we got? Oh, here we go. Coincident. Random, oh, hold on, I gotta change the view on my phone. It's dark right now. I gotta change it to bright. Otherwise I'm not gonna be able to see shit. Notifications, display brightness. Light colored screen, there we go. Alright. Sabe, visible, reflected in mirrored sunglasses. Title of this email. Hi Steve, my name is Mike and I have a theory on how the image reflected in the sunglasses was captured. You recently told a story about fox hunting with red spotlights. In the same way the foxes could not see the red spotlight, people can see infrared light. But your cell phone camera can. People cannot see infrared light, but your cell phone camera can. This is easily tested. Take any infrared controller like your TV remote, aim it at the cell phone's camera and push a button. You should see a reddish blue light flashing on and off. This is an old trick I learned from testing remote controllers. Probably worked with trail cams too. The man shooting the video was saying he could hear but not see things around and right in front of him. Assuming the Sabe were cloaked and invisible by some method of only reflecting infrared light back to the world around them, which we know they can see. The image was captured by the cell phone camera when the Sabe standing in front of the man was reflected in the mirror surface of the sunglasses, and it picked up the infrared image. We only see things around us because they reflect visible light back to our eyes. If, like a piece of glass, the Sabe were somehow only reflecting infrared light, they would be invisible. How? No idea. But it's a starting point. Maybe some clever member of the round table will figure out a way to run with this info. You can use my name. I'm old, retired, and have no F's to give. Mike O'Day. Mike, appreciate, man. I'm going to be checking that out myself, too, and I appreciate that email big time. And I have a feeling a lot of things are coming together fairly soon. They're coming together for me. I can't speak for everyone, but they're coming together for me. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I have a funny feeling a lot of people are going to be able to start seeing these other people, these woods people, possibly one they want. We'll see what happens. But that still does not answer some of the most important questions. Questions I have about us. Not only them, but us, right? I think that's going to be key for all of this. It's about us when it comes down to the bottom of it. All right, the sun came blaring out. A little too bright for me out there to read, so move in here. There's another one. This is titled A Hair-Raising Experience. Well, Steve, I wanted to share my experience with you for a long time. I live in Maryland and hunt on Carroll County. I've been hunting the same area for the last 25 years with my brother. This particular property is approximately 100 acres and backs up to deep forest for miles. My first encounter was just before dusk while in my tree stand. I noticed a shadow moving from my left about 30 yards away, heading toward the pond. The silhouette was about 10 feet in height because the thicket is about 7'6" tall and the being's shoulder was near the top of the weeds and was approximately 3.5 feet wide at his chest. I did not feel worried or concerned. My second encounter was also in Carroll County, Maryland, on public land, when I saw a large being hiding under a large fallen tree roots, looking as if it was waiting to ambush a deer. Both happened during bow season. I really love your program and have been a listener for about 4 years. I'm pleased to hear you and Sarah helping feed the less fortunate. God bless, take care. You can mention my call sign, PMCH1. There you go. Welcome to the club, man. Welcome to the club. Glad you sent that in. It's endless. What do we got here? Another one. A lifetime of near experiences. Title of this email. I, Steve, been watching your videos for many years now, and they've helped greatly in piecing together many of my near experiences during my 57 years of life. Finally, I'm convinced through your recounting of others' experiences that I can no longer discount these encounters as being false. My first near experience is when I was 12 to 13 years old. I was invited to come camping for 2 weeks with a neighborhood family that I was good friends with in the hills above a small town in Idaho called Riggins on the Salmon River. On our drive to the location, my friend's parents decided to stop at a location for a much-needed pee break. Us kids took off into the trees, and not far in, we found some tree structures that just couldn't be explained. Loud. There's no way that any hunter wasted this much energy to construct these. They're random, in the shape of teepee frames, but the leaning trees were too large and primitive for anyone to waste their time constructing. We just couldn't explain them. So eventually we climbed back into the pickup and went about our way to the camp location. We spent several days fly fishing for many species of trout that was present in the nearby stream. We could catch our daily supper. On about the 4th or 5th day, we began venturing out further from camp and picking huckleberry for sweet snacks. I got bored and took off up the trail by myself, not really paying attention. But at one point, something bolted from behind a tree. It had to have been watching me closely because it bolted precisely when my eyes went back down the trail in front of me. It literally made a whoosh sound and the bipedal sound of footfalls. It was so incredibly fast. I could still remember the feeling of being deceived at the time, having it move out exactly when my eyes went back to the trail in front of me. I told the adults upon returning to camp that something ran off from behind a tree, only to get a glazed look from them. They didn't take me seriously, although I knew it wasn't normal, even for a bear encounter. Now, well, I sort of blew off that memory. My next near experience was on the Big Tree hiking loop above, yet again, the Oregon Caves in 2019 during the bullshit COVID epidemic. My girlfriend and I were living in my RV, hunkered down on a pot farm in an area off the Caves Highway. My girlfriend then loved to hike, and we were growing restless. So I mentioned, let's go hike up at the caves. She was super stoked. I had mentioned that I'd seen the video about the Grants Pass man and his sighting on the trail previously. About halfway through the 3-mile loop, we heard the strangest false bird calls. The sounds weren't from anything I'd ever heard before. Having lived in the nearby forest previously, the sounds didn't match any other bird sounds native to the area. The bird sounds came from large lungs and carried through the trees. The sounds followed us for quite a distance, and eventually were coming from 2 different locations in the trees. It never occurred to me at the time to start looking up into the trees. Sort of glad I did. I finally told her about the YouTube video I'd watched, and she was sort of pissed that I hadn't prior to our hike. We recorded the sounds on our phones, but have since lost them. I believe 100% that we encountered day watchers on lookout. My next experience is in 2020 while being camped at an event on a private archery range east of Eureka, California, and near the base of Mount Shasta. At the time, I was using a Teton XL cot/tent setup that I had pitched under a tree, quite a ways away from the main group. Around 3 a.m., I was awoken by a large rock hitting the steel leg of the cot. It woke me straight up, having made a huge noise striking the cot leg. What the F? I wondered who in the hell could be throwing rocks at my setup, especially at that hour. I got out and took a long pee and back to sleeping. The next morning, I told a friend what happened and tried to explain it off possibly a cougar scratching and clawing the ground and possibly flung a rock up. That's a good one. Because one was seen walking up the dry creek bed next to us the night before I had arrived. No way in hell could a large cat huck a rock like that with such velocity. Still another unexplainable source. My next experience was in 2022 while working at a hemp farm near Trail, Oregon. We were doing a growing method called light deprivation, where basically you are mimicking fall light conditions, shortening the daylight hours with large plastic bag sheets. Basically, we had to get up at 4 a.m. and go out and drag the plastic tarps over the beds. Totally sucked. We wore LED headlamps. One morning, I noticed widely spaced, glowing red eyes watching us from the tree line above. I was in shock. Being observed by anything that hour was very unnerving. I picked up a chunk of PVC pipe and hurled it as hard as I could towards the eye shine. Whatever it was, it stood up, turned, and casually walked back into the forest. The Argentinian fellow who was helping me had never seen anything like it before either. I'm glad he could take this experience back home with him to South America. I believe once you are aware of these beings, they'll follow you for life. When I was young, I had a very vivid dream of the face of a bear-like face staring at me in bed through the bedroom window. It was so vivid. And why does it stick in my memory this very day? As crazy as it sounds, I was visited by the bear spirit and marked for life. Thanks, Steve, for sharing our experiences on your channel. It has explained much of what I have experienced. Thomas Sykes, Shady Cove, Oregon. Appreciate that email, Thomas. You know, when people say, you know, the tagging thing, I'm not so sure if it's actually, right now I'm not so convinced it's an act of tagging us individuals. I think it's just the possibility that some people are aware and some people can be aware of this truth and some people just can't. And the people that can, notice what's probably going on around all of us. I think that's what's going on. Up for debate. Mount Shasta and those Oregon caves, two very popular places to have these experiences with these beings, and I don't know why they would place a watcher. Like, why do they go to such, where human beings are all the time? Why would they hang out there? You know what I mean? Why do they keep hanging out there? Like when they say, a lot of people say they have watchers to watch out for the rest of their gang. Well, why not just leave the area where the people go all the time, you know? There's a lot of confusing things going on in that department. Another one, The Invisible is the title of this email. Thanks for sending that in again, man. Email us anytime. Hi, Steve, not sure what it was, and here it goes. My husband and I went to a park by the Mississippi River. It's rocky, very forested, and has a creek running to the river. In Iowa. Went to spread Dad's ashes. Stopped the car, crossed the bridge to waterfall area, found a good tree. After we did that, it was enjoy the park time. We went through this gate that usually isn't open. I wanted to go up the gravel road. My husband said no. We crossed back into the park. We only went about 500 feet. While walking back, I felt something running up on me. I whipped my head back, let go of my husband's hand, expecting to fend off something, and nothing was there. My husband looked at me and I told him what just happened. He didn't feel or hear anything. So we went on, crossed the bridge over the creek and got into the car to go to a different area that had trails. Driving on a gravel road, I saw this dark brown thing in the tall wheat-like grass on the side of the road creeping out, but went back in. Again, I asked, did you see that? Yeah. Okay. Drove past that area and saw a light brown deer looking at me. And that wasn't a deer before. Not even the same color. I told my husband. He thought it was a dog. Creeping out. Very weird. Deer do not kneel down to creep either. We went to the area. We went on to the area, got on trail, immediately got a few tiny rocks thrown at us from the tiny cliff above. I don't think my husband noticed. At the time he said he did, but now it's like he only remembers a little. We kept going for about 3 more minutes. My husband ran out of breath and wanted to leave, so we did. I'm an adventurer. I wanted to see what it was in a way, and I'm in a way happy we were directed to leave. I took that as a sign, time to go also. Something for sure was there. We had the whole park to ourselves. It was so very quiet. And that was not a deer. That still has me to this day. Thanks, Steve, for all you do. Michelle and Dennis Mattery. Welcome to the club, Michelle. Welcome to the club. All right, here we go. There's another one. Mysterious Creatures. Title this email. Please don't use my name. Thank you. No problem. Hello, Steve. It's taken me a couple years to decide to write this. I'm not the type to do this normally. Not many of us are. I'm glad you did. My dad grew up in a very small town on the Continental Divide in Colorado in 1932. He was born and raised in Sargents, Colorado. Back in the 80s, my dad and I were hunting elk in the first rifle season, just east of this small town. Traffic. My dad knew this land like the back of his hand. His family survived mainly on game throughout the Great Depression, and I was about 20 years old at this time in the 80s. We were hunting a ridge line in fairly thick pine. My dad was about 50 yards above me as we were traversing this ridge horizontally. It was a perfect Colorado day, blue skies, soft quiet ground, full of pine needles and aspen leaves. The squirrels were talking. Nice cool breeze in our faces. Back then I had a better than 20/10 vision. My dad had found some sign and we heard what sounded like antlers rubbing on bark. We moved slow and steady in that direction. As we were going along, I noticed it had become dead silent. No squirrels talking anymore, no breeze. I could feel the sweat on my forehead trickling down. It's a weird feeling. I wasn't frightened at this point, just a different feeling. I glanced at my dad and he was stalking low and very serious in concentration. I had about 300 yards of view through the trees at this time. We started to hear a very low grunting. I personally thought it might be a bear. I looked at my dad and he shrugged his shoulders like he didn't know what it was. We kept getting closer to the sound, but I could see nothing. The sound kept getting closer and I still couldn't see anything. We kept going and this is where I started getting concerned. I was carrying a 30-06. My dad had a .243. The sound this creature was making made me feel very uneasy and thought that we should have brought a .50 caliber. The grunting was so low in tone, I thought it might be a gorilla, but much lower guttural sounds. Steve, this freaked me out. We got about what I would say 50 feet away from the sound and it was so loud. I still could not see anything. And out of nowhere, we heard this creature crashing through trees, crushing branches and snapping tree limbs. And breathing very loud as it ran away. The breeze came back and the squirrels started talking again. My dad walked over and said he had no idea what that was. I know sound is funny in the woods sometimes, but I could have seen a fly on an elk's butt at 100 yards and I saw nothing. No movement whatsoever. I've been hunting again since then, but I've never gone back to that area and never will. Stay safe, Steve, and God bless. Yeah, it's pretty frickin' bizarre, isn't it? You put me right there with you. No thanks. No thanks. I wonder how many more people have that exact same experience and don't want to acknowledge it or write in about it, talk about it to anybody. All right, this next one's titled, My Experience, I Think. Steve, I just listened to a story you read that rocked my memory to the core. A mom and her 6-year-old walked into a constructed cave and came face to face with a Sabe, and her response opened up a memory I think I must have closed from my childhood. I can relate to why she never shared what went on with her 6-year-old. I've been approached by Sabe 3 times that I can testify to. And I have. You've read all 3 of my letters over the last 5 years, and I thank you for it. I'm not sure why it was important, as I thought I was over this issue, but now I know I'll never be over anything involved with this topic. My mom was a county girl from Coos Bay, Oregon. and her father was an alcoholic fly fisherman who was never happy with anything unless he was out in the woods. So, she was as much at home in the woods as any lady I've ever met. He never cared much for her, but he never beat her or anything like that I know of. I and my brother came along later in her life with second marriages for both her and our dad, and that's as much backstory as you'll need. This all happened when I was 6 years old. My brother was 11 months younger than I was, and this particular event started with us in the back seat of my dad's 59 Ford Brown Country Squire station wagon, driving up and down an unending bumpy dirt road in northeast Oregon, with my mom and Aunt Janice driving and then stopping to look at some map and then quarreling about which way we should go. We were going to rendezvous with my dad and Uncle Bill and 4 or 5 other men who had gone on this big hunting trip down the Smith River. No idea why I remember this. There were 4 or 5 other moms traveling with us in different cars. We were all caravanning together, and every time they stopped, we'd all spill out of our cars and the kids would go play while the moms figured out where we needed to be. One time our car overheated. We had to stop for water. So they decided we'd make an early lunch. So out came everything. My brother and I went off into the woods and we found a really old bridge crossing a stream with enough water to wash you away if you didn't watch for it. And being the idiots we were, it was only a matter of time before we were all over that bridge, and soon my brother had fallen into the water and lost his footing. We were only 11 months apart, but I was much bigger than he was, so I went in and helped him stand up and get out of the water. When he got out, it was my turn to climb up, and I slipped and went down. The water took me down, and I was washed away. It happened so fast, I don't remember much of anything about it, other than I had no way of catching or grabbing or holding on to anything. I would imagine I must have panicked. But just as fast as I've written this, I was grabbed and then pulled up out of the water and placed on the side of the river. It was really big. It was hairy, and I could not look at him. I'm not sure if I tried. He put me down and then pulled me back up on my feet. My brother had ran back to the cars and brought our mom back, and I saw them come around the trees to see me and him just standing there. I remember her looking at him more than me at that moment. I started walking to her and never turned around. He must have gotten back into the woods, and my mom just took my hand and we turned back to the cars. Now, some 60 years later, I know she must have had a conversation with him. She wasn't mad at all. I thought I was going to pay with blood, but nothing. I went back to the car, changed my clothes, had lunch, and then refilled the radiator. No words about this were ever spoken about this, and it was totally forgotten. But now that I think about it later on in life, she never had any fear whatsoever of my brother and I going off into the woods. I never asked her about her times in the woods and any knowledge of Sabe. Her past was a mystery I'll have to wait for. All right, Ron. Appreciate that email, Ron. You're not the first one that's been saved, right, by something big in the woods. Quite a few people have, especially kids. And there's another one. Crazy, right? Okay, I'm going to read one more. Go put some drops in my frickin' eyeballs. What a pain in the butt. This is titled Australian Encounter. Hi Steve, I very much enjoy listening to your channel. I've sent this through before, but I guess with the volume of stuff you get, it probably slipped through the net. I've come to realize that some of the facts from this experience fit in with many of your reports, namely the size of these things, the unnatural level of fear, the smell, and the way these things sometimes just seem to vanish. This occurred in Australia some 34 years ago and continues to haunt me to this day. I was 27 years old and had recently arrived in Australia from the UK for a year-long working holiday. I'd remade contact with an old childhood friend from the UK and her boyfriend. We had been undertaking a short several-day touring and camping trip around New South Wales. And one of the places we stopped was the Wombeyan Caves State Park. This is an area of quite spectacular cave formations and natural park with dense bush and mountains. Anyway, we had spent the day exploring the caves and got back to the campground to cook supper. By the time we had cooked and eaten it, it was quite dark, but the sky was clear, and with the absence of any street lighting, the stars were shining brightly. We decided to go for an evening stroll through the bush on a dirt track. As we walked down the track, we heard a real commotion up above us to the left, maybe 30 yards away. It seemed like there were several dogs in some kind of compound that were going absolutely crazy. I've never heard dogs in that state before. There was, however, another element to this, and that was the presence of a large animal with very heavy footsteps. It sounded like it was running up and down next to the compound, almost like it was deliberately trying to round them. The interesting thing about this is that the footsteps were in a sort of a 1-2 pattern rather than a regular trot. It was like 1-2 stop, 1-2 stop. As we got closer, it became apparent that this thing was heavy, heavier than any natural animal in Australia, and certainly heavier than a full-grown man, and was quite obviously bipedal. It was difficult to believe that a large kangaroo would be running around in dense brush in pitch-black conditions. And at this point, my friend Julie became spooked and decided to wait where she was, whilst we agreed to carry on and check it out. We both had flashlights with us, so we decided to walk off the track into the bush, although we were pretty spooked. The track at this point curved around to the left and was cut into the bank above us, such that we were forced to walk a ways around this bend to a point where the bank leveled off and we could climb up to walk in. We lost sight of Julie at this point. All the while the noise continued and we started walking in slowly. I have to admit, as we got closer, we started to get really spooked. This thing was really heavy, and from say 20 yards away, we could feel the ground shaking with its footfall. At one point we looked at each other and decided that it was just too much. And I remember distinctly thinking that whatever it was might attack if we showed up and shone our flashlights on it. I've not experienced that level of fear before, and it was difficult to rationalize. We decided to head back to the track, and at this point we heard the thing change direction and come running, not directly at us, but more of a 45-degree angle directly back to the track. It came crashing through the branches at full speed. And remember, it was pitch dark there, no moon or lights of any kind. The next thing we heard was a loud thud as it reached the 5-foot bank and jumped onto the track. We heard no more noise from it. This is odd, as it had 3 possible exits. One was back along the track we just used, but Julie stood there and later said she saw nothing. The other way was further along this track, but we had sight of this, and it definitely didn't go that way. The third way was over the track through the brush, continuing the direction it had come. At this point, the brush changed and became very dense, paper bark, and almost swamp. There's no way anything could run through that without making a noise. It just seemed to vanish. We reached the track again and started walking back to where Julie waited. As we crossed the point where the creature hit the track, as it jumped off the bank, there was the most terrible smell, like rotting flesh mixed with a really dirty animal smell. Very strong and not pleasant. Unfortunately, Julie saw nothing as she was around the bend in the track, and we never saw it either. To this day, I'm unsure if we made the right choice by not proceeding further. Were we in danger? If we had seen it, would we wish we hadn't? Who knows, but it's something I'll never forget. Best regards, Jeremy in the UK. No doubt you're not going to forget that, Jeremy. No frickin' doubt. And who knows? Who knows if what actually seeing that thing with your eyeballs would have done for you? I don't know, man. Who knows? It's mixed reactions so far from people, right? But some people wish they did. Some people wish they didn't. But anyway, that's it. I'm going in. I'm gonna go put my eye drops in. This is driving me absolutely bonkers. I cannot stand being compromised in any way, especially when you're frickin' out of town, right? You're with friends, you're in the middle of nowhere on a trip, and you can't just like go back and see them in a week. It sucks dick. But anyway, share my story at howtohunt.com. Get it to me, especially from the southern U.S. right now, right? So it might be a chance I might come and see you. I'll be back shortly.